This is CounselCast, part of the Legal Talk Network, and I'm your host, Karin Conroy. When you face a complex case outside your expertise, you bring in a co-counsel for next-level results. When you want to engage, expand, and elevate your firm, you bring in a marketing co-counsel. In this podcast, I bring in marketing experts who each answer one big question to help your firm achieve more. Here's today's guest.
Hi, I'm Jessica Aries. I'm a lawyer turned digital marketer, and I help busy lawyers perfect their digital presence online. I'm so excited to be here.
Again! We are so excited. Now that we're kind of creeping up on starting the third year of the podcast, I've gone back and found some of the best of the best. And so here we are with Jessica Aries again, because there's a lot of stuff we didn't cover in our first episode, which is almost a year ago now. Plus, social media moves so fast that even in the legal world, where the legal world does not move so fast, as you know, that I think it's going to be so fun to kind of talk about where we left it, and then where things are at now, and then kind of what's changed. And there's lots to talk about. I promise it's not going to be a 3-hour episode. We're just going to kind of do what we can do. So here's the title for today's show is Social Media Growth Hacks, Mastering the Right Platform. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today, Jessica, after saying thank you for being here, and I appreciate, I always appreciate talking to you. Actually, before I get into what I wanted to talk about and where we wanted to start, I first want to mention how awesome and kind of aspirational your LinkedIn content is. And I probably mentioned this last time, but not everybody has listened to every single episode, even though they should. So first of all, everyone needs to check out the consistency and quality of content that Jessica kind of puts out on LinkedIn, because it's not just kind of regurgitated, and it's very useful. So I just want to put that plug and kind of point it out as a point of mentioning her expertise here. So let's start with last time we were talking about the metaverse. Let's start there.
Well, first of all, thank you for the plug on LinkedIn. I will tell you, put a lot of time and effort into that, so I appreciate when people read it and acknowledge it, comment, or even just mention it to me. People sometimes will just come up to me on the side of the street when I'm out in public and be like, I follow you on LinkedIn, and I'm like, wow, okay.
Whoa.
Didn't realize I had that reach. Yeah.
Wow, you're like Taylor Swift of the LinkedIn.
No, I'm really not. I know, I laugh because I have 1,800 followers, which isn't a huge audience.
But it's clearly very targeted.
Amplified. Yes. It gets amplified in ways that I had no idea, and shared in ways that my follower count does not display at all. So it's kind of fascinating, and the power of social media, going back to platforms, is just super interesting. But
it's fascinating.
The last time we were chatting, you were talking about the metaverse, which is a total, I feel like everything now is about AI and threads and all these new topics. And it just really goes to show that this industry, marketing in general, moves so quickly, and that even the strategists, myself included, we are drinking out of a fire hose, trying to keep up with what's happening, what's changing, how strategy is shifting, how algorithms are shifting, how video content has become so prevalent. It's a changing and evolving game, and it takes a lot to stay on top of it. And the metaverse itself was a kind of a topic that was emerging and seemed like it was going to be a force, and now it's way less prevalent, way less discussed. And so it just goes to show, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yes. Okay, so I think that's lesson number one. For sure, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Even LinkedIn. There are limitations, and I think in a few minutes I want to kind of go through sort of the pros and cons of some of the big ones. Mm-hmm. So clearly there's limitations to LinkedIn and all of, but don't put everything there. And we'll get into that in a minute. But let's talk about, because I was thinking while you were talking about how now, we were at the metaverse and now we're at AI. And to be honest, if you dig into the sort of foundation of both, it's not super far removed. I mean, we're talking about robots and this virtual reality, not the stuff that we all imagined in sci-fi movies when we were growing up. But where do you think kind of the metaverse lost it and lost its luster? And then the next thing I'm wondering while you were talking is like, how do you look at a platform like that and evaluate whether you should kind of invest your time and kind of efforts there?
Yeah, so I think the metaverse kind of lost its practicality. So
Yes.
the barrier to entry, the barrier to actually getting into the metaverse, interacting, it was really only super welcoming to those who had the tech skills and who had the desire to buy the headset or
Yeah.
the desire to log in and really understand. I think on top of that, it kind of lost its luster too because it was so associated with crypto, and crypto took such a crash and had such bad PR around a lot of these big exchanges kind of failing and people losing tons of money. Like that puts a really negative appetite in people's mouth for this idea of like, okay, let's go feed into this thing that first of all is more difficult to access, is going to take equipment, is going to take extra time and energy to actually learn to use.
Yeah.
On top of that, the way we would do commerce or the way we would interact would require us to use this cryptocurrency, which is not doing so hot right now and might
really
not
weird.
have the same value later.
Yes.
So,
yeah, and I feel like for me, I kept looking at the metaverse and then I would see the sort of avatars like walking through this fake land and I'm like, listen, I'm a tech person. I love all the technology, but this is weird. I feel like I'm picturing 12-year-old boys like flying their little spacecraft. This doesn't feel professional on any level. Like, where can I find the professional people? And I know there were arguments for this because I early on had a show with someone who was talking about where lawyers can go in the metaverse and all of that. Mm-hmm. But it just didn't ever quite click for me. It never made any sense.
Yeah, and I think, so I don't want to say the metaverse is done.
Okay.
Because I do think there's going to be opportunities in the future.
Sure.
Especially with Apple coming out with its new VR headset.
Yes.
Where I just think it might look different than how it was initially proposed to us. Just like the first MP3 players were those like Rio things that were so hard to download and upload music. Until Apple invented 10,000 songs in your pocket, right? The iPod.
Yes.
I think it's just the first version of it we've accessed is cumbersome.
It's
just
weird.
like the first versions of the internet were cumbersome to access, right?
Even the first version of social media was MySpace. It was way before Facebook, and that's gone. And that's clearly been kind of shoved over to the side. And then Facebook came along and just like threw a grenade in that whole thing. So yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. Just kind of that it's going to be there in some. There's no way Apple would invest in something like this VR headset without having some finger on the pulse of something that's coming down, in the future.
Yeah, and I think it's just going to look different. And Apple is genius at this, at reinventing what we initially believed to be how things would run. The iPhone is the perfect example of that, the iPod, and I should disclose, I did work for Apple for a number of years, so I'm not trying to plug Apple or anything.
For that, I drink the Kool-Aid, I am all Apple products, yeah. Okay, so that's the metaverse, and then let's slip over to kind of these AI-driven, I guess how that would relate to social media mostly for how we're using it is it's kind of driving our content and not necessarily, we're not using it as a social media platform, but it's helping us to create the content for social media. So how is that, I mean, it just seems like it has taken over.
Yeah, it has. Well, I mean, the utility of it has taken over. The idea that I don't have to stare at a blank cursor when it's time to write my social media post, that I can create ideas, I can create concepts, I can take this long form piece of content and distill it down into something more synthesized, more digestible, easier for my clients to understand, and not this legalese kind of written content that a lot of lawyers write.
Yes.
With something like ChatGPT, I think that's the utility of it has really come to light for lawyers and for content marketers and marketers like us. But then on top of that, lawyers are seeing their entire industry kind of be disrupted by AI with some of these new tools that are coming out that are kind of doing the jobs that baby associates used to do, you know, with analyzing the case law and pulling together potential cases to fit certain fact patterns and even putting together, clauses or suggesting clauses based on, contract review or something like that. That kind of stuff, we were seeing that. I mean, I used to work in an immigration firm. We were seeing that kind of stuff happen in immigration law a while back. It's now coming in full force to all areas of the law. Yeah. And so I think that's where whether you're a marketer, whether you're a lawyer, you can't really hide from it. And you shouldn't hide. You should be learning it. You should be embracing it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're going to be wasting money by not even considering, and it shouldn't necessarily take the place of people or whatever the case might be, but it should just kind of supplement their time and improve their efficiency and all of that. So let's I wanted to talk, I mentioned earlier about kind of going through different platforms, kind of pros and cons and things like that, and then how we can use AI, kind of how you were describing. So LinkedIn, obviously the big one. That's where I find your content most regularly. I know you're all over the place, and we do a little bit on TikTok and all that with these podcast posts, but that for us, and I don't know if it is for you, but that's all just sort of supplementary for us. Mm-hmm. And the main ones, what are the main ones that you use in your agency?
Yeah, so we use a ton. We do a lot of short form video content, and that's mainly because that is a huge kind of service line we do, and especially for our firms that are doing a lot of recruiting, the big firms that are doing a lot of recruiting, they're thinking about those millennials, those zillennials, or the Gen Z who are using those platforms and trying to get their message out to them that they're a great place to work, right? Yeah. So we're doing a lot of that kind of content, and in order to do that, you really have to have your own presence on that platform, those platforms like Instagram Reels and TikTok, YouTube Shorts. But then on top of that, we're also daily posting on LinkedIn, regularly sharing thought leadership, really just trying to walk the talk. Yeah. Because it's really hard to advise lawyers, like, you need to make time for this if you're not making time for it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like you get judged for the quality of your own content and whether they are, going to hire you. If you've got typos and kind of problems in your own social media, it's like instantly the same thing that I look at when I'm looking at websites and things like that. It's like, oh my gosh, you can't try to be out there being a professional and selling your services when your website is hacked. I literally had someone the other day contact me and they're like, I think I need a new website. I'm like, you need more than that. You've got all this spam. Your website is hacked. Like, there's all these bad spam. So I'm like, oh gosh, it's so bad. It's such a bad first impression. And I think the website has always been kind of talked about as the first impression, but I feel like it's like 1.5, whereas the social media really is the first impression, and then they jump over to the website to kind of validate, get more info, get the finer details. Okay, so LinkedIn, you're doing these short form videos. Clearly, you guys are seeing that works, right?
Yes.
And do you do the same short form video on all the different platforms, or do you make variety, make them different from one platform to the next?
So the platforms have different time limits, which makes it challenging. Yeah. So something like a YouTube Shorts, you only have 60 seconds to get your point across. So we're typically, when we're creating short form content, we're recording something that might be over 60 seconds. So we're having to edit it down to 60 seconds, which is super fun. Yeah.
Like take out the breathing. Yeah.
Exactly. Or take out my intro with my name and instead just have it pop up over my head or something. Some way to kind of shorten that content up and tighten it. But it's also a great challenge in copywriting and in getting really concise in your message. So generally we try to post the same content. We're just trying to fit it to the time links of the different platforms. I will say TikTok really loves the trending sounds and the trending kind of topics. And for any strategy in social lately, we find the more entertaining, the more self-identifying your content can be to your audience, the more likely it's going to get reshared, the more likely it's going to get viewed. So you can put out a lot of how-to, value-based content, but if you don't have anything in there that kind of makes your audience chuckle or makes them go, wow, that's a funny way to look at it, or oh my God, I feel so seen, right? That type of content is actually the content that we see gets the most reshares and really builds our audiences. So we use heavily trending sounds on TikTok to do that and grow our audience in that way.
So with that in mind, how can they go? I feel like I can almost hear lawyers' brains explode when you say
that. I know.
And I'm sure you have these conversations every single day where they're like, I have to be funny. What? So where is the line where they don't want to go too far, where like, okay, be funny, but don't be a total, like, don't try to pretend like you're a 17-year-old skateboarder or, whatever, influencer. So do you kind of have a box that you try to advise them to sort of stay within, to be still a professional lawyer and kind of present that way?
Yeah, so the thing I remind them about is the things that will actually make your your audience chuckle or like laugh are actually the things that show you really know them. So that can be something as simple as, you know, for marketers, it's something like if you have 900 tabs open at any one point because you're working on 16 different projects at once.
Yes.
That kind of content is very self-identifying, is not derogatory, is still funny, and is very self-identifying without feeling like you're crossing some sort of line or you're having to do some silly dance or you're having to make fun of yourself in some way. It's a way for you to say, hey, I see you so well, GC, or hey, I see you so well, COO. Like, I understand that this is something that happens in your day-to-day life every single day, and I'm going to laugh with you about it and say, let us help you tackle that.
Oh, that's really good, because I do feel like you, I'm sure, have seen a million examples of where it's cringe, and it's like, oh, gosh, you're a lawyer. What are you doing?
Yes.
And I can only imagine what those potential clients are looking at. And it's like, they're instantly thinking, oh my gosh, I could never hire a lawyer like that. And so that's, I'm sure what a lot of people listening are thinking too. Like, I am so fearful of going too far and, you know, and appearing that way where it's like bad and embarrassing, you know.
I 100% align with that. I think there's a difference between feeling like you're identifying with your audience and shaming them or looking silly.
Yes.
And so that's actually, those are our parameters. Like, we always ask ourselves before we put out a piece of content, is this too silly or is this too shaming? Because I also feel like sometimes when you are self-identifying with your clients, you might accidentally create a piece of content that's shaming when in fact you want it to be empowering.
Yes.
You want it to be like, look how awesome you are that you can juggle all these things, instead of, why are you trying to juggle all this? You should just hire me, right?
Yes.
So it's really important to frame the question and to think a little bit differently about your content as you're creating it on those types of platforms. From, am I being too shaming? Am I being too silly? Or am I finding that fine line between humor and empowerment?
I think this is like just key content strategy overall, because I know that as we are sitting down with firms and setting up their strategy, that core message and positioning is so critical. And to make sure that your tone is appropriate for your positioning and who your clients are is everything. And it's really not easy to do. And it's definitely not something that you're going to find on ChatGPT or these platforms that create the content for you. You have to run it through your own filter that fits into your positioning kind of framework. And this is where I think the platforms, not where I know where the platforms can't do the work. So they can provide you, I regularly ask for like 20, 30 examples of ideas for XYZ, but then I have to take those 20 or 30 and say, okay, which fits and which is appropriate and which is going to be awful, like you're saying, shameful or too silly, or just basically, you know, here's the box of where our positioning is. Here's who we're trying to talk to. Most of these are not going to fit. And maybe sometimes you have to run 30 of them a few times. Like, who cares? It takes 10 seconds, you know, like just keep going and keep going until you get to the place that you need. But this is critical, not just for social media, but for all of it. And I can't tell you the number of websites I've landed on where it is 100% like pointing a finger, totally shameful, or super boastful and egotistical. And like nobody, that is such a huge miss in social media, to just be all about the ego of the firm.
So, 100%.
Yeah.
I would like to just agree 100% with that.
I was like up on my soapbox there for a minute.
No. Well, you know, I have clients sometimes who come to me who want to produce that types of content. And I'm like, we're not the right agency for you.
Yes.
That's not the type of content we make.
Yeah.
We know it doesn't work. So if you want to spend thousands of dollars making that type of content, great. But I don't want to waste your money, and I'm not going to do that to you, you know?
So give me an example of kind of what they're looking for, and let's say that they actually listen to you, and they're like, okay, I get it. Like, that's not quite the right angle. So how do we make it better? So I'm guessing, I'm just going to pull this out of the air. I'm guessing it could be something like a personal injury attorney, because I feel like there's a lot of ego in, especially if they've had some success and they've seen so many other websites and social media accounts that are all about the dollar signs, and they just want to do like, we've had these millions of dollars of results. So if you are having that conversation and it does turn around, like for the better, how would you take that and adjust that kind of message and approach in a way that does work?
Yeah, so the first thing I remind them is there are a lot of personal injury lawyers out there who get great results.
Yeah.
That is not a differentiator, actually. And that's something that really, I've had lawyers go head to head with me when I'm like, that's not a differentiator. You're 30 plus years of experience and this is not a differentiator. Your multi-million-dollar verdict is not a differentiator.
I love
that.
The
differentiator is you.
Yes.
You and how you approach your content, how you put your personal brand out there, how you talk to your clients.
Yeah.
And there are some lawyers who do a really good job of tough love and a great, like on the line, like able to empathize, but still give tough love with those types of clients that need it.
Yeah.
But not all clients need it. And that might not be your target audience. And let's be real, if you are having to have your entire firm built on tough love clients, that's a lot of time and effort and energy you're putting into managing those client relationships.
Yes.
If you could have some of those that are just the regular types of folks who will actually follow the directions and do the things that you tell them to do, that kind of book of business is the type that actually really grows and scales firms. And it's a different message. It's not the tough love message always. There needs to be a bit of a mix of content types in there. You can have a few of those tough love stories, but you have to have a mix, I think, of that self-identifying. We understand you, that empathetic. We can identify with you.
Yes.
We've had, I think, too, taking those numbers and turning them around to share the story.
Yes, I was
them.
just going to ask about the storytelling of it, because I feel like there, especially with personal injury, not to be so stuck on that, because I know there's a million other practice areas, but I just feel like there's so many lessons to be learned. But there are so many stories there, like so many like kind of heart-wrenching stories. And if you get them well presented so that you're really communicating, like, getting to the heart of it, you've got kind of a listener forever.
Absolutely. And the stories are what sell. You have to be careful with stories, though. Yeah. Because it's an ethical thing. Like, not all stories are the results, right? So from an ethics standpoint, you need to make sure you have your caveats in there. This story is, one example of probably many.
Yes.
But that being said, stories do sell. And when you're able to share them in a compelling way and you're able to put them on the platforms in a way that helps others also self-identify, like, that person is exactly me, or I've had a very similar experience, and people can align with those clients that you've had, that's what ultimately gets people to hire you over somebody else, and that's the differentiator.
Yeah, I really feel like those are the cases where, not the cases, the kind of clients and the projects where I've seen it absolutely have those kind of results that everybody's aiming for, where it just like shoots, that hockey stick thing everybody talks about, where you're just kind of plodding along and then all of a sudden, boom, you get a big spike. And if you put the time and effort into developing those stories, you don't need 50 of them. No. You don't need 50 every year either. Sometimes it's a handful of stories that you can continue to reuse and repurpose in different ways and then take slices. So I have one firm in particular who put the effort into making some videos and like went out, got the clients, had the whole, like, it was a lot of work. And I'm not going to pretend it's not, because all good marketing really requires some work. Same as, being a lawyer. If you're going to do the good work, you'll see the, results and all that. But now we've got this chunk of videos and work and all that stuff, and we can continue to reuse those for a couple years at least. So, just keep in mind like the big kind of story that really supports the sort of mission and values of your firm. And if you can get a couple of those and then just continue to, have clips and little pieces and a testimonial, and then you do some stuff over on social media, and, you can use it in a lot of different ways so that you can really maximize, that content and that work that you did. So let's go into, so we talked about Metaverse. We talked about LinkedIn. So what about some of these other platforms and like pros and cons? So you said that you use LinkedIn and then the short form videos, which typically is like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts, but you can take that piece of content, use it on all of them. Are those the main platforms that you use? And then the sub question is it different for your clients?
Yeah, so we actually, those are the platforms we use, but we use them with a campaign approach. So we have one usually big piece of content we're creating. It's usually a YouTube video, because that tends to be, YouTube has such power from an SEO perspective for us, and such visibility for us. It's somewhere where a lot of people start consuming first our YouTube content, and then later come to our website, later start following me on LinkedIn. So YouTube is a huge driving force for us. So we'll make a long form video, break it up into short form videos. We'll then break it up into other pieces of content, carousel post on LinkedIn. We'll break it up into, we repurpose everything.
Yes.
And so our real goal is to create like this kind of hallmark piece of content that then gets distributed in a lot of different ways across all the platforms. And then we take that content and we break it up into tweets, into threads. Actually, now we're using way more threads than we are tweets.
Oh, I want to get into that next. Okay, so that's genius. And I feel like that is kind of what I was alluding to with those stories too. Like create some really great stuff and then find a way to use it all over the place. Do you typically just try all the platforms? I mean, keeping in mind this idea that we were talking about in the beginning where, you know, there's going to be some platforms that come in, make a splash, and then disappear. Well, I guess we're not going to say that the metaverse has disappeared, but it's sort of like behind the curtain. Like, I can't really see it.
Yeah. So for our clients, we tend to stick to the ones where their audience is. That's the number one thing.
Sure.
As a social media strategist, marketing strategist, I have to be on the new platforms, so I don't really have a choice to be like, I didn't really look at that or care to learn it, right?
I know. That's an awkward conversation.
Unemployed, yeah.
Exactly.
Fastest way to say bye to my agency. But for lawyers, I'm looking at audience size on these different platforms. I'm looking at engagement. I'm looking at what's actually possible, right? So if we were to run ads, if we were to work on building a strategy, a content strategy on these platforms, is their audience there, number one, and two, are they engaging on the platform? Because there are plenty of people who lurk, but what actually gets your content to like be viewed by others is engagement. So we want a nice kind of mix of both of those.
Yes.
So if you are, a B2B AmLaw 100 firm, your clients might not be on TikTok.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd say far more likely they aren't on TikTok.
Yeah. Right.
So does it make sense to post your content there? Probably not.
Right.
Does
and it's going to look weird. And it's because, I mean, honestly, if I go to the firm like what you're describing and I go to the bottom of their page and look at their social media links and I see TikTok for a firm of that size, I'm going to think that's really strange unless they have a very specific purpose for it. So I would say like maybe there's one sub practice area that has a very specific need for that.
Startups maybe?
Yeah.
Or like trademarks maybe?
Yeah, something
I don't know.
very, very unique. But typically I'm going to look at that and think, what? That's kind of odd. So you don't want to have that kind of reaction. You want to be where you're expected to be. And I think what I just want to kind of underline that you were saying a minute ago is that you're choosing your platforms based on numbers and metrics and like for real reasons, not just like, I don't know, what should we do today? Like just kind of pulling it on here. Yeah.
The fastest way to lose money and spend money on marketing that's ineffective is to not look at the data.
Yes.
So,
oh my gosh, I love that. I just highlighted that one. It's like we are pulling that quote out for sure. That's a good one. I love it.
It's just the truth. I see too many people come to me and they're like, help me with my marketing. And I'm like, why are you spending so much time on this platform when your audience isn't here? Why are you doing this? Doesn't make sense from the data. Like we can go into analytics, we can go whatever analytics platform you have and see you're not getting any traffic from that, or you're not even getting messages or views. So why are you spending the time there? So
I just think there's so much feeling like I should be there. Like I saw this other guy and it seems like they're getting traffic. It seems like I don't want them to get all my stuff and my people. But so I feel like I should be there, or, like all the other guys are there. It's the grass is always greener. And when people say that, I'm like, come on. What do you say to people who kind of say, well, all my competitors are there and, you just kind of come back to the data?
I come back to the data, but I also say, watch out that shiny object syndrome, what you have.
Yeah.
You're basically comparing yourself to somebody who you don't even know is getting necessarily that level of traffic or that level of engagement or even leads from all that effort and time. But on top of that, that's the fastest way to build a losing strategy. Your strategy should last more than a month, right? Yeah. Your strategy should be something that you can build out for the next 3 to 5 years and feel good knowing that it's not something that's only going to live in existence for the next 3 months, right? That it can only perform for 3 months.
Yes.
And in fact, if you're working with a strategist or anyone else who's like, I can guarantee this for the next 90 days, but after that, or I don't know that they would ever even admit that after that, they can't necessarily get it to perform. But I think it's important that your strategy is bigger than just, I'm going to do this because someone else is doing this in my marketplace.
Yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so coming back, you mentioned Threads a minute ago. Mm-hmm. Let's come back to that because I feel like this is the conversation that is similar to the metaverse conversation that we were having a year ago and the whole world was having. And today, and where everybody's talking about now, is Threads, which is supposed to be the Twitter killer, right? And so you even mentioned yourself, your firm is now spending way more time on Threads than Twitter, right? So talk about that and what you're seeing there and kind of what everybody is talking about and whether it's a good idea, you think, in broad generalities for most law firms.
So let me preface by saying when I say my firm is, I'm actually talking about our individual digital strategist. So Threads in and of itself, because it is so new, we have all of our clients have set up their Threads accounts there, but we haven't started posting there because there's a lot of limitations. It's not completely a built out system. It's still very much in beta mode. You can't use hashtags. You can't sponsor or, have any kind of ads there. So it's much more of a very personalized network at this point. It's much more like Facebook was in its infancy when it only allowed college students in, right?
Yeah.
It's people just sharing random thoughts about that happen in their lives and stuff. So the way I'm using Threads and the way I think most lawyers and anyone who wants to even access Threads should use it is very much from a personalized place. So is this a message I'm trying to amplify in this moment? But realize that this has to be a human-to-human connection thing. Yeah. This can't be a company-to-human yet at this point. It just doesn't have the capabilities yet to be able to do that. So for most of my lawyers, I'm actually telling them, wait on Threads. Let's see what happens with Threads. Let's see. The whole reason why everyone signed up for Threads and got a Threads account is because it had a built-in audience that came with it. If you had an Instagram following, your audience transferred over to Threads, which is great. That's a great way to grow a platform really quickly. The main metric I'm now looking at is, do those people stay on Threads and continue to come back, continue to use Threads, continue to access it, continue to want to be part of that platform.
Yeah.
That'll be the data that's going to decide whether or not we migrate all of our clients to cross-posting content there.
That is so interesting because it's been, as of this time when we're recording now, when did they launch? About a month ago?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and even now, a month in, and by the time we recorded, or by the time this is published, it'll be about two-ish months. It's being less and less of the conversation that from what I can tell already. Like, so I feel like also it's Facebook, Instagram. This is not just some random. What was the one that was like the audio thing that came out during the oh my gosh, Clubhouse. Like that was just a random platform. Was that backed by any major company? I don't think it was.
I don't believe I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. I used it for like a month and then I was like, okay.
This is a lot of work.
So this is really Clubhouse was really like an answer to the fact that we were all holed up in our house.
Exactly.
And now we're not all in lockdown, right? So it's like,
and they had no sort of
call my friend up.
Exactly. And it was like, or let's like just go meet in real life like we can do now. And they didn't really have an answer to what comes next. And that's what I'm wondering about Threads is what comes next. However, because it is this massive, massive corporation, they probably got teams of people working on that. So I would not anticipate Threads going away anytime soon. Obviously we're recording and this is going to be published and I could very well be wrong and we could meet in another, in the future and have this conversation and laugh about how wrong I was. But I feel like it will iterate and it will figure this out and it will find a way to make money. Like I'm not worried about that part. Like they will find ways to make money.
I think they already have a proven strategy with Instagram and with Facebook, and the fact that their Meta is the parent company, that they know how to make money. The issue is, are they going to be able to continue to entice people to show up and spend their time there? And I think given just what's happened with Twitter, if it really does continue on the track it is, which is basically just becoming a new Twitter, there likely will be opportunity for it to have longevity in that way, because I think a lot of people are really tired of Twitter.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too, that I feel like they've got this moment where people are looking for it and they want it to be reliable. There's been so many of these platforms that have come out and just gone away, and we've invested time and effort in, and then it just goes away. And so the fact that it's backed by Meta is giving people a lot of reassurance and so that's also bringing people in and you know, bringing the stability of it. So yeah, I can't wait to see. We should come back to this maybe like 6 months or so from now and like see where it's at, because I'm sure there will be moments where it's like, oh my gosh, what did they do? What were they thinking? Or like, oh, here's this this is how it's going to all come together, or you know, whatever. I'm not trying to, you know, get my crystal ball out, but there's something's going to happen.
Well, I remember when Instagram shifted to video, there was a huge backlash, right? Making that change. You know, what I thought was really interesting was the messaging around Threads, is that they messaged it as an Instagram company, not as a Meta company and not as a Facebook company.
Oh,
and
I think that's interesting. I didn't notice that.
I think that's because they're trying to distance themselves from all the privacy issues and all of the Cambridge Analytica stuff that happened with Facebook.
Oh, fascinating.
And their strategy has to shift because they don't have the best reputation with people right now, at least Meta and Facebook. I think that's also why they rebranded to Meta.
But do you think that's also trying to separate from Twitter as well? Because Twitter has had similar issues with messaging and, you know, all of the politics and news and everything with Twitter. And so Threads is clearly trying to be like the anti-Twitter. And so it kind of aligns with all of that stuff.
Correct. And the cool version. I mean, let's be real. Like, Facebook is kind of now considered like something our grandparents use. Yeah, like, right? It's not, it's where grandpa goes to be like, well, I'm going to complain about something like my bread getting squashed at the grocery store, right? Like, that's what grandpa's going to put on Facebook, right?
Right.
And write happy birthday on the wrong cousins, right? Like,
yeah, or get hacked. Like, you just get the hacking messages from all the older people in your life. Like, all of a sudden, like, you get a friend request from somebody you already are friends with. It's like, oh, here we go again. Like, this is what I see on Facebook.
Or share that post that's like, I do not consent to Facebook charging me $8.99 or whatever, like something weird, you know, like to use my photos. And you're like, what? This isn't even a real thing. But anyways, so that's what Facebook has a reputation for. Instagram definitely has that more youthful, cooler kind of reputation. And I think that's an important part of Threads being successful, is they don't want to be associated with that kind of grandpa. Right. kind of
to kind of compare, like, this is the perfect comparison of some of these platforms, and I agree that Facebook is the older community, but I will say the one thing that keeps me going back to Facebook is some of these groups that I'm a part of, and I can't find that anywhere else. Right? Like, that is not on any other, it's really not LinkedIn at all. Like, it's not at all, it doesn't function the same way. And so that is, for me, what Facebook has and kind of keeps me coming back to. So, and I feel like they've got the corner on that. And so is there a benefit marketing wise for Facebook in terms of like those groups and the way people are using Facebook in that way?
100%. So that is one of the smartest things Facebook ever did was actually allow you to create these private groups, these groups that are not discoverable, these groups that you can build full-on audiences around and then market internally within those groups. Yeah. And I think that is one of the things for Facebook, as if you're a lawyer, if you have a very specific demographic you're targeting, that's one of the smartest and fastest ways to have a built-in audience that you can market to, is build a private group around the type of area of law you practice. Yeah. So it's not as effective for maybe the B2B, the larger kind of global firms, but for those that are more the B2C, maybe you're a divorce attorney, maybe you're a immigration attorney, something like that. If you're building a resource group, a group that's really focused on providing resources to your community and your ideal target audience, you will have then a built-in pipeline of leads and potential prospects who you can market to very easily. So I think Facebook was smart in doing that, and that's one of the core advantages. And I'm part of plenty of those groups too. And it's also been a great place to even just find, during the pandemic, I was like one of those people that was like, what daycares are taking kids right now, right?
Well, exactly. I was just going to say, so like the moms groups, I feel like are some of the things that are powering Facebook right now.
Correct.
And so like there's a local moms group. And so I'm in an area in Southern California where we had a lot of wildfires. And that is, we got evacuated, the whole deal. That's where all the news was happening, was like in those groups, in the moment where we all are like going moment by moment, trying to figure out what's happening. It was on Facebook. The other example I had is in that same moms group. I'm in a like relatively large sized city, so it's a huge group of thousands of moms. But like when I'm planning a birthday party, I want to use a local bakery. I don't want to go to the grocery store. I don't want to, whatever. I want to use a nice small business that's local, but I want it to be good too. Like I don't want it to be gross. And so that's where I'm going to go to get my references and resources. And so if you can find something, and I found the greatest little bakery that everyone was recommending. And so that if you can find those kinds of groups that align with your firm in a similar way, where people are going to give you referrals and resources, and there's a good size community there too. Like obviously you don't want a group of 10 people just kind of in their own little echo chamber, but it can be super good for Facebook. But I will say that's kind of far and few between for lawyers. Like that's kind of hard to come by. But when you do, one last example I'll give is a firm that we're working with that does a lot of family law. So they're in their local community group. So once again, like, it's moms and stuff and kind of, but also local events, things that are going on. And then they're also active in that community. So they can just kind of provide events or be a sponsor or just be active in that group in some way. And that totally works for them. So
100%. I was gonna actually say. So we have this newspaper here. I'm in Texas, locally here, called Community Impact, and it's a micro newspaper focused on very small neighborhoods and stuff like that in the Austin area.
Yeah.
And they write these very in-depth articles on these very hyper local pieces of content. I feel like the thing that's akin to that is Facebook's communities with its small little, neighborhood groups and it's moms groups and it's, therapist groups and the groups that bring people together based on how they self-identify.
Yes.
Taking that information too. And that's akin to what it is. And that particular newspaper is doing very, very well in a time when most newspapers are declining.
Yes.
So I think the rule of thumb is to think smaller,
to
think more targeted
Yeah.
in who you're approaching. But then I think on top of that, going into those groups and asking questions or hearing what questions they have can be great fuel for content, can be great fuel for what you write on LinkedIn, what you share on Instagram, and how you create, let's say, a TikTok channel or a YouTube video.
Yes.
Just allowing yourself to kind of observe and be a little bit of a lurker in those groups can be a great way for you to
Yeah, that's such great advice. So if you can find the kind of correct and appropriate groups that are your target audience, and then just go in there and spend some time. Like that's going to be an investment of some time and effort. Okay, so it is time for the book review. I know you have a good one that ties into all of these things that we've been talking about. And just to mention that we have this library on the website of all the books that our guests have recommended. So there's so many good ones, and they're typically related to the topics that we're talking about. So business, marketing, all these good things. So Jessica, what is the book that you have to add to the library today?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to get the name wrong. Hold on. Future Lawyers.
Tomorrow's Lawyers.
Tomorrow's Lawyers. I was like, I'm missing this up. I knew it.
That's why sorry.
No, so I love this book. So this is actually the 4th edition of this book, and I've read every edition. Ooh. And the reason why I think this book is so important, it talks a lot more about kind of what's happening in corporate legal, so what's happening in those who deliver services to kind of corporate entities. And why I love this book is it's talking about actually how the law in general is shifting to more of a commoditized kind of service offering.
Yes.
Where we're productizing the services, and that the law, the legal work that's going to be the stuff that can get that really high billable rates and that really high kind of prestige, right, is becoming less common. And that it's really important for lawyers to think about the opportunities in between that really specialized work to that very kind of more systematic kind of work that you can do, especially now using tools like AI to help you leverage that and actually create services that people need and want, but maybe not at that very super high price point, but you can create volume around those. You can create systems around those. You can build a department that doesn't maybe look like the traditional law firm department or law firm entity. You can add tech solutions. You can add, this particular author, Richard Susskind, talks a lot about technology and legal and how it's so behind and how once it catches up, that's going to be the future of lawyering.
Yes.
That there is 90% of it is going to be this type of work that falls within these. He had 5 buckets in the first books. Now he has 4 buckets. In this last version, he eliminated one of the buckets, but
that makes sense though, because it does feel like that's kind of how things are progressing. They're getting, more direct and succinct. And so it sounds to me like what you're describing is that a core amount, like if you take your pie chart of your business, a huge slice of that pie and sort of everything that pays the bills is almost automated, systematic, very easily regurgitated type work. So let's just say criminal defense as for an example. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of DUIs. It's a lot of like the same old stuff. And that's what you're going to advertise for too, because this is what is going to be your flow of the majority of traffic. But you're also going to have a nice chunk of another slice of the pie, which is your high-end, high complexity, high personalization type work. That's also your high-priced work. And so you have to balance that out. But you have to have that like meat and potatoes work that is the stuff that churns like on a daily basis and pays the bills.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he takes it to another level, talking about what's happening internally in corporate legal departments, where they are becoming much more efficient at what they do because they're not billing by the hour, whereas everyone else in law firms in particular in the corporate environment are not necessarily doing that fast enough.
Yeah.
And so what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a gap, a huge opportunity for those mid-sized, smaller-sized firms who are willing to innovate, who are willing to come up with new services that align to the models of what their clients want, which are cheaper services, faster, but still done right.
Yes.
And there's a huge opportunity there, and that
that sounds
that's basically
so
what lawyers should be looking at.
I love that. That sounds amazing. Okay. We will obviously link to that book on the show page and in the library and all of that good stuff. So you can find that on the website for the podcast. Okay. What is one big takeaway? We have covered a lot. I feel like there's been a lot here. What's a big takeaway that you'd like to get? And then also, I feel like this takeaway, we're going to come back to this at some point in the future and be like, okay, remember when we were talking about threads?
Yes.
It was brand new.
I think the biggest takeaway from today is really knowing who your audience is and using the data to make sure that before you choose a platform to invest your time and energy and resources in, that your audience is actually there. And then when you start creating content for that audience, make sure it's something they identify with and that that resonates with them. And don't be afraid to be a little funny sometimes and use your quirky side to market your services.
But not too weird.
Not too weird. Yeah.
Keep it within the box of being a lawyer. And I think your example of kind of like, are you the person that has 500 tabs open? That's a perfect example because like we're still talking professionally. We're still like in your computer and not like getting personal. Don't be shaming them or be too silly, but try to get some humor in there. And honestly, I feel like that can be complicated. So you may need to get some help with that. Probably.
It takes a bit of art, right? That's something ChatGPT can't do for you. But doing it is what gets it reshared and gets you that engagement and builds your audiences. So
awesome. Jessica Aries, find her on LinkedIn. I mean, honestly, like not just to connect, but just to see the quality of this, all of this content. It's so great. And we will come back to this in however long we decide, whatever works for our calendars. But we will come back because I do think we need to kind of have this like review of what happens with Threads over the next, 6 months to a year, and like let's come back, and who knows what's coming next. Like maybe there's a new version of Twitter that comes out of whatever. I'm not going to make predictions.
I was going to say, if I could give you any advice, go claim your handle at least, so you have it claimed, and then go from there. You don't have to post, but just claim your handle so that no one else claims it for you, and then the
one thing I noticed though is it has to be the same as your Instagram handle.
Correct.
So long story short, somebody took my name, and so my handle from like my personal account is like a variation off of my name, and so I couldn't get my actual name on Threads, which stinks. So one lesson in all of the history of social media is make sure you get your name. Like even if you have a second one for your business and all of that, get your own name. You don't want somebody else out there posting under your name.
It's so true. Buy your URL too for your name.
Yes. 100%. Awesome. Okay. So many little nuggets of value. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the CouncilCast podcast. Be sure to visit our website at council-cast.com for the resources mentioned on the episode and to give us your feedback. If you enjoyed this episode, I would appreciate if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe to your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.